Hey, this is Seagrove, and today I'm here with Mikey Fouchet. We're going to be talking about social standing in the Pokemon TCG, benefits, drawbacks of both good and bad social standing. But before we get into it, I'm going to let him introduce yourself. Mikey, why don't you, for anyone who may not know who you are, go ahead.
Sure. I've been playing the game for a long time. I'm from the Northeast area. Been kind of all around the Northeast. I'm down in Baltimore now. I've been part of Six Prizes for, 7, 8 years, pretty much since it started. I write for them. I do their podcast. I've been back competitively in the game for the last 4 years or so. This is my fourth World Championships, and I like doing videos like this and different types of content creation. So I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. Love your podcast, by the way.
Thanks.
So for good social standing, there are obviously a lot of benefits, some in-game, some outside of game. Why don't you just give us an overview of what you think some of those might be?
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about it at a high level, and there's really, I think, two aspects of this before the tournament. So a lot of that happens online, just the nature of the game. Some of it happens in real life, but I think a lot of players look to the online community as kind of their main way of sharing ideas, talking, testing, etc. So there's a lot of things that happen in that half of the game. And then the second half is when you're actually at the physical tournament, and there's a lot of benefits of having a lot of friends and a lot of connections at those. So those will kind of be the two main categories that we'll touch on today.
Okay, well, let's actually start with the physical, because I think that's a little bit smaller and more focused.
Yeah, sure.
What are some of the benefits when you're at a tournament or when you're playing the game even of having a good social standing?
Yeah, okay, so we'll kind of go through it chronologically. So before the tournament even starts, so if we're thinking about a regional, for example, everyone might get there Friday night, and you're maybe with 1-2 other people, depending on who you're friends with, and you're in their hotel room and you're testing, and so you have so you at least have those immediate people that you're staying with that you can talk about and get ideas. Now, if you're a little bit more established, you might also have a couple other hotel rooms that you can go into and get people's opinions, be like, hey, what was your group thinking about for tomorrow? I feel like since I started playing a long time ago, the tournaments have gotten so much bigger that it matters less to keep secrets that close to a tournament. So I mean, 5-6 years ago, regionals were maybe like 100, 150 masters, right? And so the chance of you playing a person that you were talking with before the tournament is much higher.
Right.
Now there's like 700, 800, 900 people. The chance that I play, Russell Lepar, if I'm talking to him the night before, is much lower. So it's actually much more beneficial for us to discuss what we're going to play and what we're expecting to play against and kind of the trends than it ever was before. So I find now that people are much more open to having those types of conversations before the event even happens, which I think is really great. So if you have those, even those tangential, not super close connections, they're not like your best friends in the game, but you're cool enough with them that you can have those conversations. That's like a huge benefit. So that's kind of like before the tournament even starts.
Yeah.
Then on actual tournament day, it's great to be able to, you get paired against someone that you recognize their name, and you go and you ask a friend, hey, do you know what Caleb Gedimer's playing? And just, even like having that like 2 or 3 minutes going into the match can be really important. You can start to develop your game plan for how you're going to approach the round. At the extreme example, you might, in the first game, you might have 2 basics in your opening hand, and then you can, better choose which basic that you want to start with. Doesn't always help all that much having that knowledge, but it can never hurt. Just as an example, at NAIC this year, I actually played against Caleb round one, and he was playing the same Zoropod list that like Jimmy Pendarvis and Azul and all them played. And so after game one, he went through almost his whole deck. So I had seen, you know, all of their weird techs. I saw the triple parallel, the delinquent, the double counter catcher, etc. And so after that round, I went back to my group that I'm like good friends with, and I was like, yo, I just saw this weird Zoropod list. Caleb was playing it. I bet, you know, Jimmy and Azul and them are playing this. And at least one of my friends ended up playing against one of those other guys throughout the day. And so it gave us, you know, like that's really valuable information, things that you can expect, especially when there's weird things out there. So, and of course, like at a tournament, it's always good to have more friends. It's just more fun.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. So then there's the online aspect, and that can be a lot of different things, just like willingness to approach people, stuff like that. Why don't you talk to us about some of the online benefits of having good social standing?
Yeah. In my mind, this is even more important, everything beforehand, because it makes the actual tournament experience so much easier if you've done the right preparation and talked to the right people. So do you want to talk about building the connections first or just the advantages?
The advantages first.
Okay, we'll start with the advantages. So you get to like message a bunch of different people, and even if you're just talking about ideas, you get to bounce ideas off them. You get to be like, hey, what do you think of this card? Hey, do you have a list for this deck? I heard that you were working on this. Or, you know, if you know someone's particularly good with a deck and you feel comfortable messaging them, like that's even better. Like I remember when Vespiquen was a deck, I would message Rahul all the time about it. Be like, yo, dude, you're the Vespiquen guy. Actually, recently, since Gardevoir is kind of like on people's radar now for Worlds, people have been messaging me a lot about Gardevoir. They're like, hey, I know like you've been playing Gardevoir all season. What do you think about it right now? And so kind of being comfortable with those types of connections with specific decks, I think is a really big deal. Beyond just ideas, I think having lots of different people that you can hit up for testing is really good as well, because everyone kind of knows the PTCGO ladder is very hit or miss. So the more people that you can feel comfortable being like, hey, do you want to play a game right now? That's only going to make your testing quite a lot better. So that's kind of like a basic overview of just general, like random connections. If we take it a step further, you might develop like testing groups or teams online that, you know, a lot of the testing groups, they don't live near each other, right? So they don't play a lot in real life. So having, you know, a group chat or a message board that you have with a couple of other people to discuss ideas and keep everyone in the, you know, on the same page within your group, I think is really important. I've been really lucky to be a part of X-Files for, I don't know, over a decade now, and personally, we keep a message board that chronicles all of our deck lists and choices and some conversation and whatnot, which is like a super, super valuable resource. Just to
tournament reports as well, right?
Tournament reports as well, as much as possible, though Sam and Pablo aren't the best at doing that. But yeah, exactly. And it's good for reflection after the fact, and it's good for just organization of ideas. So I've always been a big advocate of having somewhere where you can, as a group, record your ideas and whatnot. So yeah, I think that kind of gives most of the advantages, I would say.
Okay. Before we get into the how to build the social network, I want to talk about social standing and like teams, like sponsored teams. Yeah. And I know this probably isn't like a great thing for either of us to necessarily speak on exactly, but I'm sure you have like a decent idea of it. Surely, I don't really know what my question is here, but surely there's a benefit in terms of chances of getting sponsored for having stronger social standing. Like teams aren't going to want people who have maybe been banned for cheating, or they're less likely to want that, or they're less likely to want people who are constantly being rude online, or stuff like that.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, so like I'm good friends with Ray Cepaletti, who kind of made the jump from Pokemon to Hearthstone, and we always talk about that. The main reason that it's been difficult for sponsored teams to get into Pokemon is that a lot of the top players are not nearly as visible on social media, and if they are, then they don't have the following because so many less people are following these people because they weren't on social media beforehand.
Right.
And so I think we're starting to see some players actively trying to be more active. I know I talked to Jimmy Pendarvis at NEIC, and he was telling me that he's really trying to be more involved on Twitter, more involved on Hey Fonte, to kind of be that positive role model and positive image for the game. And I think that goes along exactly what you're saying. I think the more that the top players try to do this, that their sponsorship opportunities will come more and more because of that. So, and I guess kind of related is I do think that the more visible you are, the more connections you have, the more social standing you have, etc., you just get more opportunities. Right. Yeah. So you might get asked to write for a website like Six Prizes or 60 Cards or Poke Beach or whatever. You might get asked randomly by people, hey, are you coaching? Would you mind coaching me? I know one of the kids that I'm coaching right now, that's kind of how it happened for me. I was just kind of a person in the community, and they messaged me on Twitter, say, hey, can you coach? And I was like, yeah, sure. Sounds good. You also get featured on content, like things like this, right? I might ask you to be on a podcast. You might ask someone to be on a video. And it's kind of like self-perpetuating almost because,
right.
The more that you're on those types of things, the more well-known you get, the more people want to, be connected with you. And then it kind of snowballs. So if you can start somewhere, then it's much easier to, keep the ball rolling.
For sure.
So, yeah, I think that kind of hits on some of what you were trying to say.
Thank you for articulating that.
Yeah.
So let's get into building your social standing, like making connections and putting out representing yourself well to the community.
Yeah. So couple things. Let's start with just be a nice person. Like, I think that's like the number one thing. Most of the good players in the game are pretty good people, like at heart, and they appreciate other good people. The second is just be willing to put yourself out there. When I first started getting into the game, I looked up to some of kind of the good players at the time. Like Jason was like the god at that point. I mean, he still kind of is, but like I read his articles on Pojo. I was like, I want to get to know this dude. And so I kind of like slowly just started messaging people that I knew might, be in that top player scene. And I wasn't shy about it. And eventually I kind of just broke in. I started having more and more conversations with good players, and, that got me better. Good players generally don't mind if you message them as long as you're not badgering them like all the time, but
right.
Send them a message. You start off with like, it's like, hey man, like I really liked your article on this. Would you mind like expanding on some point? And then, even that just builds builds like a small bridge that you can then kind of, keep going on from there.
For sure.
Especially if there's a top player that you kind of want to, that is in your local area, that helps even more. You talk to them at a local event and whatnot. So, and with that said, like I said, you also got to respect their time. You don't want to try and
right.
hog them up all the time. But we really appreciate people appreciating us. I guess people.
Yeah.
I think that's human nature. You like to be liked, and so yeah. I recently, and like in the last year, I feel like I've talked to like you and Kirk quite a bit, and you guys are like perfect examples of that. You're trying to get better at the game. You're not shy about asking for help now and then, but you're not like always messaging me and being like, yo, what do you think about this? So I think that's really important, just not being scared to put yourself out. The next thing is like, if you're asking for advice on how to get better, don't like dismiss the advice then outright. I think that like
that is so big.
Yeah, I think that's like the biggest thing for top players to axe a connection. Because if you're asking me like, oh, what do you think I should play at this League Cup? I just need a top 8 to get points. And I say, well, I think like either Buzzwell Lycanroc or Zoroark Lycanroc's the most consistent deck. Don't turn around to like, oh, I don't want to play those decks though. Like, okay, well then why'd you ask me for advice? If I like, yeah. And yeah, so I think that's really important. Let's see, if you play against like someone that you respect and someone that you think's a top player, maybe at the end of the game, regardless if you win or lose, you can ask about moments that or plays that you were uncertain of. Be like, hey, on this turn I did this instead of, and I was thinking about this. What do you think? Even if you can't think of like specific moments, you might just say like, were there any spots where you think that I messed up or could have done something different? I really think that's great when players ask me that at the end of the game. And I'll still ask people that at the end of the game.
For sure. In
moments where I'm particularly unsure of a play, because like you don't know if they have a card in their hand or whatnot, and then you kind of just initiate a conversation where and you get insight into what that person may have done. Kind of related to that, things like Azul's recap videos, and I think Russell's done them and whatnot, where they review matches. I think those are like some of the best things to watch if you're trying to get better at the game, because it really gives a lot of insight into it.
The asking about what could I have done better, the one thing on that is make sure that if you won the game, you need to make sure that don't do that if you win and your opponent's not taking the loss well.
Sure.
Like, even if they're a good player, like sometimes it's a hard loss, and you just need to say like, hey man, good luck in the rest of the tournament, or whatever. I mean, there are other things. I'm not gonna get into everything, but like, just be careful about if you win, asking someone. A lot of people are fine with it. They take losses really well. Mm-hmm. Some people don't. So just being aware of that. Yeah.
Well, and to that point, even in the moment, someone might be frustrated that they lost. Maybe they got really unlucky. But maybe like, an hour or two later, you see them kind of hanging around, and they're probably cooled off by then. And then maybe then you can initiate the conversation too. I had two opponents at NEIC. They were these young guys, I think first year masters, and they both beat me with Malamar. And like afterward, they were both so happy, and I was taking the loss fine, but they would be like, man, like, I don't know. They're like, I can't believe I beat you. That was such a great match. And then they asked me about some of the plays, and we had really great conversations. And I forget the two kids' names, but if your guys are listening to this, like, you guys did it perfectly. It was really well done.
Very cool.
And especially if you win against a top player, I think if you say that, like, I really respect what you're doing, and I've always enjoyed your content, like that, I think that goes a long way too, to kind of, help ease that loss for the other guy.
Sure. Yeah. You were going into something else.
No. That was it.
So, in terms of the negative side, is there anything, like, any way that having good social standing can hurt you as a player, or that bad social standing can actually help you? I know that's like weird because you never really think about that side of things, but is there any way there?
I do think good social standing. I don't know if I would call it good social standing, but I do think the known factor sometimes can hurt you. I played against someone at NEIC where they were kind of feeling, I got paired down, so I could still make top cut, but they couldn't, and they were kind of getting discouraged about the game, and then they're like, maybe I'll just scoop to you. But then they asked like if I have my Worlds invite, and I was like, yeah, I already have it. And they're like, oh, all right, I'm gonna try and beat you then. And I think that was like, just for their own pride, playing against someone that had made Worlds. And so
that's interesting.
Yeah, and I don't mind that. I think that's like fine to want to do, to like
Absolutely.
really want to prove yourself against a good player. So in that sense, I think it could hurt you if you're kind of like a known player. People might really
want to beat you.
really want to beat you, and I think that's again totally fine. On the flip side, I think if you're a known player, or if you get paired against a known player, sometimes you're more nervous, you're more jittery, right?
Yeah.
And you're more prone to make mistakes. So I think that it's kind of a two-sided coin. But yeah, I don't know if there's any other thing that I can think of that is bad for having good social standing. Maybe if the fact if you talk to too many people, then you got to be sometimes careful with some of your ideas. They might get out, they might get leaked or whatnot. So I think that actually kind of goes back to something else I wanted to talk about is when you're having these conversations with different people, it's good to set expectations about what can be shared with other people and what can't. And especially if you're kind of starting off with a new testing group, and you have 3 or 4 people, 4 or 5 people, whatever in a group, and be like, okay, guys, if we come up with something in this chat, maybe we really got to keep it within this chat. And then if you want to share something outside, I think it's good practice to go and ask the chat, like, hey, can I share this? Can I play this in real life with my friend when we're testing or whatnot? So I think, I just think setting expectations, I think, is really important. And that's not to say that you can't share things outside of that group and have conversations outside that group, but just knowing what everyone else expects, I think is important.
Yeah, for sure. Were there any other topics that you wanted to touch on here that we had mentioned earlier before we close?
No, I think I hit all my bullet points.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and hopefully this gives people ideas of where to get started as they're growing Pokemon social network and etc. But thank you for your time. Do you have any last-minute shout-outs you want to give? I know you mentioned a lot earlier, but...
Yeah, just shout out to Six Prizes. Listen to the podcast. I think we'll have another episode sometime before Worlds, hopefully. If you didn't listen to the last episode, it was with Philip Schultz, James
Arnold.
Yeah, James Arnold and Jimmy Pandarvis. That episode so far has the least views of any of my episodes, and I think it's by far the best one.
It was great.
So I really would recommend people checking that out. You really get a lot of insight in how to prepare for a large event with some, not standard decks. So but yeah, and shout out to you. Thanks for having me on. And to all those people trying to get into and building their social networks, feel free to message me. Feel free to message people. I think you'll find us more receptive than you think.
All right. Thank you.